This week at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, the NASCAR Xfinity Series will be encroaching on the halfway point of their regular season. The NASCAR Xfinity Series has been filled with a lot of dramatic moments this season, and by the time we are getting to the halfway point of the season, we are starting to see the championship battle be morphed, and we're starting to see the haves and the have-nots, the coulds and the could-nots, the maybes and the maybe-should-haves. So, with that being said, I'm going to be taking a look at the NASCAR Xfinity Series grid and take a look at what the playoff picture looks like right now in terms of the drivers that might make the playoffs right now, that are on the trajectory of making the playoffs right now, and maybe some of the drivers that should be a tad bit concerned. But before we talk about the playoff picture for the NASCAR Xfinity Series, we have to talk about the drivers that are locked into the playoffs right now. Ty Gibbs has 3 wins this season and is for sure locked into the playoffs. Noah Gragson has 2 wins and is locked into the playoffs. AJ Allmendinger and Justin Allgaier, as well as Josh Berry and Brandon Jones and Austin Hill, all have 1 win apiece and are safely locked into the playoffs. The first driver not locked into the playoffs is Sam Mayer, who's 104 points above the playoffs. With 6 top 5s and 7 top 10s, as well as 0 poles, it's been a fairly solid campaign for Sam Mayer this 2022 season. While all of his teammates have a win, his win will be coming, and it'll be coming soon. Sam Mayer has been quiet, but he's been consistent enough to be just right there, which is really all you need to do in order to go out there and get the win. He is turned it around vastly compared to his 2021 woes, when it seemed like he was crashing every other week. He's kept his nose clean, and he's kept himself out of trouble. And in the NASCAR Xfinity Series, that's really all you need to do in order to make the playoffs. With 104 points, it'll take about 2 to 3 races of him basically just finishing last in order to start to be concerned. So right now, he just needs to keep on doing what he's doing, and he'll be fine. Next up is Riley Herbst, who is 78 points above the cutoff. With 4 top 5s and 9 top 10s, it has been a vast improvement over his 2021 season. Now, he's only led 1 lap, and his average finishing position is 11.1, which is actually better than most of the drivers that are above the cutoff, which means that while he doesn't necessarily run well, he does execute well. And the NASCAR Xfinity Series, especially in the world of NASCAR, finishing is what's to pay. Finishing is what gets you into the championship 4, and finishing is what is going to get you a high point standing. So while Riley Herbst's speed has maybe not been there, or maybe not been where this car could be, he still has been doing enough to make the playoffs and to be in a good position moving into Bristol for the regular season finale. Now, it is still a couple of months before the playoffs, and there is still time for Riley Herbst to have a midseason collapse. But unless something major happens, he will need to lose 2 races worth of points, pretty much, to be in a bit of a deadly position. Next, there is Landon Castle, who is 54 points above the cutoff. With 3 top 5s and 7 top 10s, 0 poles, 0 laps led, an average starting position of 15.2, and an average finishing position of 12.8, it's been far from a memorable season for Landon Castle. Heading into this year, there were a lot of expectations for Landon Castle to potentially be a championship contender. I expected Landon Castle to run right about where he is running right now. However, while there are a lot of expectations for Landon Castle, I think he's lived up to most of those expectations. I mean, for the most part, he's done a pretty good job. I think in Martinsville, where he had a good run, he didn't have any issues, and he just did his job. I think when Landon Castle stays out of trouble, does his job, and goes out there and has a smooth race, he's able to showcase what he's fully capable of. And if he keeps on doing that, I think that he will be in the playoffs, not only off of pointsing his way into the playoffs, but off of a win. 48 points above the cutoff is Ryan Sieg. With 1 top 5 and 7 top 10s, as well as an average finishing position of 13.7, Ryan Sieg's 2022 season has been one of the biggest improvements, and honestly one of the biggest shocks heading into the 2022 season. This year, there weren't a whole lot of expectations for Ryan Sieg. He didn't do so well. He was practically irrelevant in 2021, and I was honestly a little bit concerned because the team expanded to 3 whole cars. That would spread a lot of employees out. That would spread a lot of people out. But that doesn't seem to be affecting his team nearly as much as we thought, as Ryan Sieg has taken a big step forward. He is 48 points above the cutoff, which is over a race worth above the cutoff, so it would still take a lot for him to be out of the playoffs, but he should not become too comfortable. He still needs to go out there and click off top 10s. He's coming off of a really bad race at Texas Motor Speedway and is heading into Charlotte. And honestly, the mile and a half is where Ryan Sieg, historically speaking, has been really good. These are his strong suits, and so he cannot afford to be bad at these tracks. He needs to continue to do what he's doing, and I think he'll make the playoffs just fine. The last driver that is tentatively locked into the playoffs is Daniel Hamrick, who's 40 points above the cutoff, or basically a full race's worth above the cutoff line. With 1 top 5 and 4 top 10s, as well as an average finishing position of 16.3, it's been a disastrous season for Daniel Hamrick. Really, the only race this season where Daniel Hamrick has showed any amount of speed was Daytona in the season opener, where he won the pole, led the most laps, and honestly had the best car that day, but didn't do so well late into the going, mainly because it is a play track race and anything can happen. The other races, Daniel Hamrick has been the worst or the second worst Kaulig racing car. And honestly, coming into this season, we didn't expect Daniel Hamrick to be this bad, especially considering he is the defending series champion. This is a terrible season for Daniel Hamrick across the board, and the best way to salvage the season is just to make the playoffs at bare minimum. I don't think he's going to win the championship this year, but at the very least, he should be in contention for one. And right now, it's looking pretty grim for Daniel Hamrick. Anthony Alfredo is the first driver that is out of the playoffs, and he's obviously 40 points out of the playoffs. Now, Anthony Alfredo is going to need to get a massive points day. The maximum amount of points that you can score in a race is 60, and Anthony Alfredo is basically going to have to put up an absolute clinic in order to even be in contention to make the playoffs. With 1 top 5 and 3 top 10s, Anthony Alfredo's 2022 season has been basically a story of him teening his way into trying to make the playoffs. He's just been getting top 15s and just been getting top 20s. He's not really fallen too much outside of those finishes. And it seems to be doing pretty good for his mountain charge to try and make the playoffs. Now, obviously, like I said, Anthony Alfredo is going to need to do something major. And so unless he can do something major, he's just going to be in this position and is honestly probably going to fade. The furthest driver out that could still mathematically lock his way into the playoffs is Jeb Burton, who is 63 points out of the playoffs. Jeb Burton has had no top 5s, no top 10s. He's not had any poles. He's not led any laps. He has an average starting position of 22.3 and an average finishing position of 16.9. So by all measures, it looks like a pretty bad season for Jeb Burton just off of the stat sheet. But in terms of his runs, they've been pretty solid. Now, sure, there has been a lot of mistakes that his Our Motorsports team has made. And there have been a lot of races where Jeb Burton arguably could have gotten a top 10 or maybe walked away with the top 15 and gotten enough points to maybe be in a better position than he currently is in. Obviously, Jeb Burton is not only going to need to score a maximum amount of points at Charlotte and at these future races that are coming up, but he's also going to need to rely on the drivers ahead of him making mistakes, being over-aggressive, and crashing themselves out of the race. And that's really Jeb Burton's best bet to try and make the playoffs. Obviously, he could win a race, but I don't think that him or really any of the guys that are on or near the cutoff are capable of winning a race. But speaking of that, let's talk about the guys that have to think about winning a race and have that as the only thing on their mind at this point. The first guy that needs to get a win is Sheldon Creed, who's sitting 15th in points. 2022 has been far from a good year for Sheldon Creed, with 0 top 5s and only 5 top 10s to show for what everybody expected to potentially even be a championship-like season. The 2020 Truck Series champion had several wins in his tenure in the Truck Series, but in 2022, he's been really irrelevant in the Xfinity Series and has been frankly making a lot of mistakes for a driver of his caliber. It's honestly unprecedented to see Sheldon Creed not necessarily doing too well, especially being beaten by his teammate Austin Hill, who many expected to be beaten by Sheldon Creed. So, heading into the 2022 season, heading into the rest of the 2022 season, Sheldon Creed is really going to need to push the issue. And right now, his only priority is to try and go out there and get a win. He's really good on the mile and a halves. He's really good at a lot of places, but I think the mile and a halves are going to be his best bet to try and go out there and potentially win. It's a long regular season, so a lot can happen, but Sheldon Creed is really going to have to boogie it in these last couple of races. You've also got Brandon Brown in 16th. Brandon Brown has also been quiet but quick and honestly has been really good in execution. He's kept his nose clean, he's kept himself out of trouble, and has dodged a lot of the crashes that have happened this season and has not made too many crashes of himself. There's Brett Moffitt in 17th, who has also done a pretty good job. Alex Labbe is in 18th, who is the highest driver in points that has not run the full schedule. He didn't run Daytona and has only made 11 attempts thus far into the 12 attempts this season. Alex Labbe has also done a pretty good job and has run top 15 at best and sub 25th at worst. You've also got a guy like Jeremy Clements, who's really good on the road courses, really good at the mile and a halves, really good at the short tracks. And Jeremy Clements, a proven Xfinity Series winner, is also a guy that could go out there and potentially snag a win. And the last driver that I'll mention is Mike Snyder. Mike Snyder is in a Jordan Anderson racing car that last season contended for wins at some places with guys like Josh Berry. Mike Snyder has had a pretty lackluster 2022 season, but there is still time to turn things around, especially in a competitive ECR-powered car. So with all of these drivers, all of these storylines, and all of these differing agendas, it leads us to the final question that I want to present to you. Who do you think is going to make the playoffs mid-season in this regular season? There is obviously a lot of players, there's obviously a lot of moving parts and pieces, and a lot can change. So what do you think? Who is going to change coming into the summer, coming out of the summer, and going into the fall when it comes to the championship season? Let me know in the comments section below, and until next time, this has been the news. I'll see you.